everyone. Happy New Year and welcome back to today's episode of the Dave and Brittany Show, aka Miracle Conversations, where we talk about cultivating a miracle mindset in today's day, whether you're a leader in a company or a leader in any part of your life and a business owner and CEOs and entrepreneurs. So my name is Brittany New and I am an entrepreneur living in Barcelona, and I'm here with Dr. Dave Assamanning. So Dave, why don't you explain a little bit more about what you do and everything?
Well, thank you so much, Brittany. It's good to be with you again in 2022, right at the start of the year. This will be the start of our second full year. We did a whole 12 months last year together of this show. So I'm really excited that we're in our second season, if you will. We got renewed, yay! I'm just kidding a little bit, but it's fun to ham it up a little bit about our Netflix-like ambitions here. So yeah, I'm an executive. Thank you so much, Brittany, for that intro. So I'm an executive coach, and I live in Florida. I specialize in supporting CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, and other leaders to develop miracle mindsets, as you mentioned, Brittany. And so, from my perspective in this work, miracle mindsets lead to improved effectiveness, ease, and fulfillment in the professional and personal lives of the leaders I work with. And I have a background in psychoanalysis and religion. It's often in the area I specialized in, it's often referred to as deep depth psychology. And it really refers to, the depth part of it refers to the unconscious dynamics of the mind, the things that Freud and Jung pioneered their work in. And then my specialty within that is a correlation between synchronicity, mostly in Jung's work. He's the one who coined the term and made it popular and more accessible to a wider audience. So synchronicity in depth psychology or psychoanalytic theory and practice, and I correlate that with miracles in mostly the Christian tradition originally. So that's really sort of my background from a scholarly and a clinical psychotherapeutic perspective. But since finishing all of that academic work in 2003 and the clinical work that went along with it, I pivoted to A Course in Miracles as the main foundation for the miracle mindset work. So that's what brings us to these calls. We take a lesson or a section of A Course in Miracles, and we provide a detailed tour of the lesson as it pertains to miracle mindset, and leadership, and personal effectiveness. So thank you, Brittany, for hosting this interview series, and I'll turn it back over to you to see if there's anything you want to lay up for us about the lesson for today.
Absolutely. So last year in 2021, we had a theme for these episodes, which was forgiveness. But this year, going into 2022, we have a new theme, which is love. And so today's lesson is going to link to love and how love is a part of our using miracle mindsets. So today's lesson is lesson number 103 from A Course in Miracles. And the main headline of this lesson is God being love is also happiness. So I know we've all heard the phrase, God is love, but this is saying that God, who is love, is also happiness. So hopefully you can break down this lesson for us, Dave, and explain how we can have more happiness this year, because that's what everybody wants. So why don't you go for it?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brittany, for that intro to the lesson itself. So I think that the bottom line of this lesson, as I understand it, in presenting it to other groups, mastermind groups I work with, and then for preparing for a call specifically, is that it's contrasting happiness with fear. And what it's really trying to communicate to us is that, by and large, most human beings have a fearful understanding of God. Right? So this lesson is trying to make a contribution towards driving us more deeply and in a committed way to embracing God as love and therefore source of happiness without fear. Right? So that's really the bottom line of this lesson. And let's just see if we can validate that thought with a section here. So I'll just read a little bit from the beginning, maybe the first two paragraphs. So it says, happiness is an attribute of love. It cannot be apart from it, nor can it be experienced where love is not. Love has no limits, being everywhere, and therefore joy is everywhere as well. Yet can the mind deny that this is so, believing there are gaps in love where sin can enter, bringing pain instead of joy. Then skipping down to paragraph 2, it says, fear is associated then with love. In other words, the two become contaminated with each other, right? By this strange process in which we as human beings begin to entertain thoughts about the fact that love can be sullied or corrupted or made less than love by our taking in fear into our minds. The result is that fear is associated with love, and its results become the heritage of minds that think they have made it real. Here we go back to some of the things we've talked about before, in that the mind will take the illusion that fearful things are real and then use them to contaminate the mind. So finally, in this section here, it says, these images with no reality and truth then bear witness, I would add falsely, to the fear of God. Forgetting being love, God must be joy. This basic error we will try again to bring to truth today and to teach ourselves that God being love is also happiness. So, in the way that we've become used to about the Course, it's very sort of technical, almost legal in the argument it tends to make. So it's saying God is love. We have a tendency to contaminate our understanding of God with fear, and then to believe in fearful things, and then to lose our happiness because we're really not holding to the image of God, the true image or the truthful image of God as love. So, in contrast to God as fearful. Any reactions to this?
Yeah, I have one question. Why do you think that people would develop a fear of God?
Yes. So this is addressed elsewhere in the Course, but I'll just highlight a couple of things that the Course gives as reasons, and then I'd love to hear any further reactions you have on those responses. So one of them is that we have had a tendency to separate out from God, right? So then that begs the question, well, why do we separate out from God? And then you'll hear me reverting to something like the prodigal child or prodigal son story from the Bible as an example, which we all by this time know in this series. I think we've alluded to it a number of times. But just as a quick refresher, here's an empire, the parent of that empire. It's male in the Bible, but, in terms of non-gender specific approaches and even non-binary approaches in today's day and age, we could say it's just the parent who's very wealthy and very powerful, and their younger child, they have two children, their adult children, the younger child comes and says, give me my inheritance, I want to go seek my fortune. And the parent says, stay here with me, you have everything you need, why would you leave here? And the child is, no, I gotta go. So very reluctantly, the parent gives the child the inheritance, the child departs, and then falls on really hard times, squanders the inheritance, has nothing left, is eating food that, in a famine-stricken land is only fit for pigs. And then at some point just rediscovers the connection to home and says, maybe if I go home, I'll have a place to sleep and some food to eat. That's all that mindset really wants at that point, is some basic security, only to come back home and be met with unconditional love. Doesn't matter that the parent says, it doesn't matter that you left. It doesn't matter that you've squandered your inheritance. I'm just really glad you're back. And you have all the keys to the kingdom again. So this idea, this tendency to separate from home base and go do our own thing is the reason why we have a fearful image of God, because in a way it's an attack on God to leave. And then that attack ends up being projected onto God as, oh, I did something bad, God's going to punish me. So God is fearful. So it's this elaborate internal mechanism. There's one other sort of explanation that the Course gives, which again won't be a final solution to this question you're asking, but the so the first thing I'm saying is the tendency to separate from God and then think attacking thoughts about God towards us, for us having separated. The deeper motivation behind separating that the Course explains is that we have what's called the authority problem. We actually want to be God rather than be aligned with God. So this is the main secret every human being has, which is that everybody wants to kick God off the throne and replace God, for which there's even a greater fear of punishment, which makes God fearful. Any reactions to any of that?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I just wanted to add that the phrase "the fear of God" has been used in Christian cultures to mean something a little bit differently. So it's interesting that the Course in Miracles uses the same phrase, but it's a very different definition. So it's not like reverence to God, which is good, but actual fear. And then another thing I wanted to add is my dad always told me growing up, fear stands for false evidence appearing real. So that kind of plays into this illusion that we need to break out of when we want to release this fear. But no, you answered my questions very well. So thank you for that.
Very well, great. I love the engagement that you and I have with each other on this. And again, to your point, excellent nuance about a lot of how the word fear is used in Christian circles is about this reverence or awe of God, and that respect and that surrender is in some ways the same thing that the Course is getting at. And agree with you totally on that. I think an extension of what we're talking about here is that the Bible, for instance, has a lot of, as I read somewhere preparing for this, a lot of smiting and smoting by God. And so that's one of the places where you have this image of God being fearful. And then the Course is trying to disabuse us of the fact that his justice or her justice, God's justice, however non-binary you want to make God, that God's justice demands an accounting for wrongdoing, and therefore Jesus was punished for our sins, right? So the crucifixion, which is a very important central symbol in Christendom, becomes associated with God's wrath against sin, and that Jesus took that wrath from God for us so we don't have to bear the punishment, right? So all these different concepts, and then there's a heaven and hell concept. Some people will be eternally punished, some will be eternally rewarded. All these things subconsciously, the Course is saying, cause people to be fearful towards God. And so it's really trying at the end of the day to get in there and say, God has nothing to do with fear. God is a source of pure joy and happiness, no threats, no punishment, no wrath, nothing. Now, those are a few nuances. I just want to see if you have any further thoughts, and then we'll go to what I think is the main exercise here, which helps us condition our minds to keep working at embracing the fact that God is love, not fear, and we have nothing to be fearful of with God. But anything from you before we do that? All right. Yes, you're welcome. So again, going back to the lesson itself, this is what it says about the exercise. It says, begin your periods of practicing today with this association, which corrects the false belief that God is fear. Almost like what you were saying, false evidence appearing real. Brittany, it also emphasizes happiness belongs to you because of what God is. So it's just this thought, God being love is also happiness. To fear God is to be afraid of joy, right? So we're just repeating this. And then the lesson says, allow this one correction to be placed within your mind each waking hour today. This is one thing the Course does a lot, right? Which says, through your waking hours in the day, every hour, remind yourself of what the lesson is. So here, the thing we keep reminding ourselves of is that God being love is also happiness, and to fear God is to be afraid of joy. Then it says, in terms of the exercise, then welcome all the happiness it brings as truth replaces fear and joy becomes what you expect to take the place of pain. God being love, it will be given you. Bolster this expectation frequently throughout the day and quiet all your fears with this assurance, kind and wholly true. God being love is also happiness, and it is happiness I seek today. I cannot fail because I seek the truth. So this lesson is very short. It has 3 paragraphs, which is why I read from pretty much each of them. Simple exercise to keep practicing this with the intention of kind of washing out the parts of our minds that consciously and subconsciously feel or believe that God is fearful in some way and will punish us. Like the prodigal child who came back expecting that they didn't have a right, really, to the keys to the kingdom, and they probably would receive some kind of a scolding, and the best that they could obtain was begging for some food and a safe place to stay. And instead, they got unconditional love and access back into all the full privileges of the kingdom. Very powerful. So we'll pivot now to some application. The main point of application for me in my own coaching work around this is that the more grounded I can be every day, every week, every year in God's love for me and for everybody else, the more effective I can be in helping others. Because then in the work that I do, I'm not really primarily warning people, threatening people, sort of redirecting people because they're doing something wrong, judging people. It's really just sort of being an extension of God's love and just expressing a kind of love. It's like, oh, you did these 10 horrible things last year, or throughout your life, you've failed this way or failed that. Doesn't really matter ultimately. God loves you. And I'm an ambassador for that message. And at a deeper level, applying everything we talked about earlier, Jesus didn't suffer to pay for your crimes and misdemeanors. God loves you unconditionally, directly, without Jesus having suffered on the cross, right? So without saying all those things specifically to people or preaching at them, just having the consciousness of all of this gets imparted somewhat telepathically to clients and helps them kind of return to a place where they feel more loved, and because they feel more loved, feel more joy and happiness, and therefore, in a sense, are more effective. Now, the final thing I'll share with this before I turn it over to you for any reactions is, then by extension, what happens with leaders is that they become sort of the same leaders. They're imparting this to their people in their organizations, right? Their teams, their frontline workers. We talk about the Lighthouse brand all the time. So they're imparting this love about the fact that God is love. They know love, they experience it, and they translate it throughout their organization, and it reaches their clients and their customers. And again, all without sort of pounding an explicitly religious message. It doesn't have to be done that way. There's ways in which this can be conveyed throughout a whole organization by values that are non-specific in any kind of religiously explicit way. All right, any thoughts or reactions to any of that?
Yeah, just in thinking about this exercise and applying it, I think that there are a couple, visualizations that come to mind that would help me practice this. So the first thing I was thinking is, because you said that one of the main reasons that people develop a fear of God is basically because of shame. So just reminding yourself before you even start this exercise that God doesn't condemn. We're already instantly forgiven. So we can put that aside. And then remembering the joy, that God is joy. God is happiness and joy. That's another element of it. And so it's kind of like the second reason you said that people develop this fear is because we want to, compete with God. We want to be doing everything in our own strength, as they sometimes say. And so I kind of envision myself, instead of being face to face with God, I'm actually shoulder to shoulder with God. And so he's able to kind of guide me every step towards unlocking this happiness. And he's kind of like the fuel of my rocket, so to speak. So I would say that, remembering that we're not condemned in the first place, remembering that we're partners as well. And he's not there like, this big overpowering giant saying, do this, don't do that. It's more like a soft whisper in the ear just beside you, kind of aligning the synchronicities to bring you this happiness. So that's kind of what comes to mind visually when I think of this exercise. But also the mantra that they've given, God being love is also happiness. That alone is very powerful. So I look forward to trying this practice.
Excellent. I love your visualizations. Thanks for making it even more accessible through those images. Those are excellent, excellent images. And makes me harken back to our anchor lesson for this year, lesson 50. One of my favorite lines in there, which I paraphrased to make it more sort of personally related to me, is through the love of God within me, I can resolve all seeming difficulties without effort and ensure confidence. This really speaks to me very strongly of this idea that we're partners with God, and God is our rocket fuel, like you said, and just simply wants to help us and assist us to be as fulfilled and as happy as possible. And that it's gotten sort of convoluted with all kinds of other very scary, very scarcity oriented limitations. So I love how you emphasize that. And so while God will help us solve all problems, that confront us, the reason is because of God's love for us. It's like a parent with a child, right? The parent would be like, yeah, you have a problem, I'll help you any way I can to solve your problem. It's not about scolding you and threatening you and making you feel bad about it. So I love how you laid that out. Very nice. So, anything else you want us to look at before we finish today? Today's kind of short and sweet. Like I said, it's one of the shorter lessons. So anything else on your mind?
No, nothing else. Yeah, I was just going to say the lesson is very short. When I was reading it in preparation for the call, I was like, oh, wow. Okay, that's all. I love the idea that God is happiness, and happiness, I guess I'd like to add, is something that maybe we forget to value in our day to day. Just the feeling, the emotion of vibrating on a high frequency. This kind of thing is very powerful and a ripple effect to unlocking miracles in your life. So this is something that I've really been working on, just kind of performing more happily, not in a superficial way, but just if I don't feel it on the inside, to try to feel it on the outside first. So that's kind of something I'm working on now, is being outwardly happy until I feel it more inside.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that you're talking about specifically what supports you to feel happy. And I in my preparation, I thought the same way. I had a number of things, and I'm ending my part of the call today with some of the things that have really made me happy. And they're practical things. I feel like Spirit has really helped me. So for instance, this show that we do, and then how you tee it up so that you distribute it through the YouTube platform we have as video, then you help to distribute it through audio for people who just want to listen and don't want to have to watch something if they're multitasking. And then also for those who just sort of quickly want to get through it by reading. These are all different mediums that can suit different people, and you have real great expertise in helping to get that out there. And then at the same time, sort of getting my social media game together, where I'm able to distribute this content of happiness and miracle mindset to my audience, getting my newsletter up and running with sort of all the automations around people being able to sign up for it, and to be able to put all of this that we do together into the newsletter. And then, I mean, there are other things, but last but not least was getting the book together about miracle mindset, getting that published and getting that out there. And so again, it's just, I look back on the last year and I'm like, wow, okay, a lot of things got done last year, and very miraculously, and I'm really happy about that. And then pivoting to this year, it's like, okay, that's all a foundation to build more things on. And I know you have the same thing going on in your business, and in your life. And then we're just inviting our audience to continue to enjoy the power of God in fulfilling us and helping us to be more and more sort of in our purpose in this world, our divine purpose. So there's a lot of joy and fulfillment. And that's the main source of joy and fulfillment, I might even argue. So thank you for a wonderful, wonderful call. I don't know, again, I've said a bunch there. You might have something you want to say to conclude for today about any of that, but
No,
yeah.
that was beautiful. Thank you for ending it on that note. That was beautiful. So audience, I challenge you to think of things that make you happy and then be intentional about tapping into that unlimited wellspring of happiness that God has for you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that ending, Brittany. And we'll look to be on the same channel with the next call about miracle mindset, miracle conversations. So, Brittany, I'll look forward to our show next month in February. And if anyone has any questions about anything that you saw here, we're both on social media platforms. You can connect with us through those, find our emails and such. And also, of course, in Miracles, Brittany usually put a link to acim.org where people can find the lessons if they're not sure where to go for those. So, well, thank you, Brittany, and Happy New Year to you and to our audience, and see you next month.
All right. See you next month. Thank you and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.